My lawyer boyfriend agreed to defend the man who caused the accident that nearly destroyed my life. So I pulled a twist that threw his life into chaos. Okay, so around 10 days ago, I, a 25-year-old female, got into a car accident which absolutely wasn't my fault. The car was parked outside a friend's house, and I was sitting in the car waiting for her to show up. I was scrolling on my phone when all of a sudden another car crashed into mine from the back. The impact was really bad, and unfortunately, I ended up spraining my neck. I've suffered from a severe spinal injury because I'd fallen off a ladder around 5 years ago, and this collision just aggravated that. The car crash led to a ligament in my neck being torn, and I've been in severe pain since then. I couldn't get out of my car to confront the driver of the other car. But as soon as my friend heard the crash, she came running out of the house and immediately called the police. When they arrived, we were both rushed to the hospital, and while nothing had happened to the other guy, I ended up in a cervical collar. I wasn't too worried about my car since insurance would take care of that, but I did press charges against the guy who hit me. I didn't know what he was on since my car was literally parked, and the street we were on was wide enough to drive by without hitting anyone, so it was insane that he'd crashed right into my car because he'd been drinking. I knew that because when he visited me in the hospital room, he was still reeking of alcohol but had tried to cover up the smell with a disgusting mix of perfume and disinfectant. I told the police that I wanted to press charges that day itself, but the guy who hit me, I'll refer to him as Chris for the sake of clarity, was very well connected. The DA refused to acknowledge it as anything other than an accident, and they even tried to gaslight me into believing that I was parked in a really weird spot. They claimed Chris had just swerved to avoid hitting a cat and had unfortunately ended up crashing into my car. I later found out that Chris was related to a really wealthy businessman, probably his nephew or something, I'm not sure, but anyway, that was how he managed to dodge the law. The car would be taken care of by my insurance company since I'd been in an accident, and I had all the proof, and the police report said so as well, but I wasn't satisfied with just that. This Chris guy had literally hit my car head-on and was most definitely drunk, so he owed me a lot more than a weak apology. There was also the issue of my health care because I had to bear the entire cost of my visit, and trust me, it was an insane amount. I had to get some tests done, an x-ray, pay for the collar, plus medicines, and all of it came up to almost $22,000. My insurance wouldn't cover all of it since I didn't have to stay overnight, and neither did I have to spend 24 hours in the hospital. I run my own small-scale bakery business, and I can afford to live nicely. I have a small apartment of my own, and I can afford rent, gas, electricity, water, and all the other essentials. I can even afford to splurge once in a while, but the hospital bill was huge, and I absolutely cannot just afford to drop that sort of money without disrupting my budget for the month. I can't exactly skimp on anything else either. I still have to pay my bills and buy groceries and supplies for my bakery business. Also, it was just so infuriating that some drunk guy could drink and drive, hit my car, send me to the hospital, and put me in excruciating pain and discomfort for the next God knows how many days, and still just get away with it because of his connections. So, I decided to sue the guy, and since my boyfriend, a 29-year-old male, is a lawyer himself, my first choice was obviously him. That was a week ago. We were having dinner when I told him about this. He got really uncomfortable when I told him about it and said that I should just drop it because it wouldn't be worth it to go after someone like Chris. I was taken aback by his attitude toward this since he could see that I was in a lot of pain, and I knew that I'd had to spend a bomb on healthcare, and yet he wanted me to drop it. We got into a fight over it, and he told me that he was too busy to represent me in such a petty fight, which was just so hurtful and made me rethink my entire relationship with him. We'd been together for only 6 months, but I'd known him for a year and a half, and he'd been my go-to person ever since we became friends. The way he behaved just didn't sit right with me. Even though I knew that he was well respected in his field, I'd never imagined that he'd make me feel so small. I was actually aware of the difference in our income and position in society, but I tried my best not to feel inferior. Maybe being a baker wouldn't make me as wealthy as he aspired to be, and maybe it wasn't an important career, but I did what I loved. I had fun doing what I do, and most importantly, I didn't rely on my boyfriend for money, so he had no right to make me feel that way. I didn't speak to him after that because I was very hurt by what he'd said, so I approached a cousin of mine who just started out as a lawyer, and she was more than happy to help me file the petition against Chris. I didn't tell my boyfriend about any of this. and had made up my mind to break up with him by the end of this week because he'd been really disrespectful, and I wasn't going to stand for it. But before I could call him, he decided to contact me yesterday. Chris was notified of the litigation process, and apparently he'd hired my boyfriend to represent him in court. My boyfriend called me to warn me. He said I needed to be careful because I'd be up against a really good lawyer, so my case needed to be airtight. He even suggested that I stop the proceedings and settle out of court because if I did go ahead, I was destined to lose. I knew that this was just that other guy's way to play mind games with me and intimidate me into backing off, but it wasn't going to work. I did feel bad about the way my boyfriend was acting, though. For some reason, he thought this was funny. I was already hurting not just physically but also emotionally, and that was enough to send me over the edge. So, I told him it was a good thing that we were already in court because now I could dump him since it had turned into a conflict of interest for me. After saying that, I disconnected the call. Since I still wasn't feeling satisfied with what I'd done, I decided to call his sister and tell her what he was up to. His sister and I are really close and have been for 5 years. We became friends in college, and after we graduated, she invited me to her house for Thanksgiving dinner one year, which is where I met my boyfriend. I told her all about what he'd done and the fact that he was about to defend a guy who's obviously been drinking and driving, knowing that his family would be all up in arms about it. I felt that they should know. They're all really into activism and are very strict about the causes they support, but my boyfriend doesn't really care. It always felt strange to me, but now I guess he's just not a very socially conscious guy, and I just wasted half a year of my life trying to be with someone who had no principles and would do anything for money. He's constantly at odds with his father, who's also an ex-lawyer, but is still active in the circuit, and usually finds out what cases his son chooses through someone who knows someone, so my boyfriend can't exactly hide anything from his family either. His sister was also not on board with what he'd done and the way he was behaving, so she promised me that she'd look into it and make sure he apologized to me. She couldn't guarantee that he'd back out of the case, but she said she'd make sure he was sorry for making me feel small and being arrogant. She told me that he had already not been on good terms with his family for a while now, and what I told her had just made it very clear that her brother was going down the wrong path, and she couldn't take it. She thanked me for telling her, and even advised me to dump him because he'd lost sight of what was important because of how ambitious and greedy he'd become. She even seemed pleased when I told her that I'd already left him. That's how bad his relationship with his family was. Now, I can't say I'm surprised, since his family has always tried to be ethical, and his sister would constantly complain about the kind of people my boyfriend would choose to defend in court just because it paid well. I didn't like it much either, but I tried to stay out of it as much as I could since I didn't think it was my place to talk about how he worked and what clients he represented. He didn't talk about my work, so I didn't want to overstep my boundaries either. But this time, I was involved directly, and he'd insulted me far too much for me to keep it quiet anymore. Within half an hour of my phone call, my boyfriend started calling me relentlessly. I decided to answer him after almost 10 missed calls, and he immediately started apologizing for the way he'd behaved. He said that he'd just been joking earlier. I told him that I wasn't going to forgive him because he'd really hurt me, and I also told him that now his family was also aware of the situation, so he could expect a call from his parents soon enough as well. That's when things got bad, and now I think I might have been an asshole for getting his family involved. He told me that I had no right to speak to his family no matter how hurt I'd been. They'd already been hounding him to work for better clients, and now it was about to get worse just because of what I'd done. He was really unhappy about my decision to speak to his sister and said that he was relieved that we were no longer together, so now he wouldn't have to hold back in court and would make sure I didn't get anything out of this. I hung up after that and blocked him, but I've been really worried ever since. We're supposed to appear in the local small claims court, and I know it's not a very high-profile case. I've only filed a claim of $5,000, which I think I'm owed because I'll definitely have to visit the hospital in the future as well for my neck. After this, I'm still worried that I might lose because my boyfriend is a good lawyer from what I know, and he rarely ever loses. Also, I think I might have overstepped my bounds and really shouldn't have told his sister like a tattletale. He is a 30-year-old man after all, fully capable of making his own decisions, so maybe he's right, and I really was out of line. Now, I'm considering just cutting my losses and apologizing to him. I don't know if that'll solve anything, but I can at least try. So, should I do it? Am I the asshole for dumping my boyfriend and telling his family that he's representing someone who is certainly guilty? Hey, so I decided not to apologize to my boyfriend because I was not wrong. I read all the messages here, I talked to my parents and a few friends of mine, and I really thought about this long and hard. There's just no conceivable way that I'm in the wrong here. He messed with me, so I messed with him. Tit for tat. And if he wasn't in the wrong here, he wouldn't be getting so defensive either. So, it's clear who has a guilty conscience in this situation and who is trying to hide it by talking a big game and being overconfident. He might be a skilled lawyer, but I have the truth on my side. I have full faith in myself and my cousin, and that's all I need anyway. So, he can say whatever he wants, but it's not going to faze me. I also found out that this Chris guy actually went to high school with my boyfriend. They have a couple of friends in common. I guess that explains how he seemed to know who I was talking about when I mentioned Chris earlier. His sister was actually the one who told me about this, and it all finally made sense. All of them went to the same high school, and she knew that Chris was an exceptionally spoiled and entitled brat who'd grown up to be nothing but a waste. He partied his way through life, and now in his late 20s, he was still struggling to find his footing at a job and was a high-functioning alcoholic. It just pissed me off to know that this guy still had a license and a nice car in spite of his alcoholism just because he was related to the right people and was rich enough to get away with whatever he wanted. Meanwhile, I still had my car in the repair workshop, had to wear a collar so my neck would heal, and had to take painkillers every other day just to be able to work. It was so unfair already, and my boyfriend choosing to represent this idiot instead of me was the cherry on top. I guess some people really do think money comes over morals, but it's okay. That just tells me what kind of person he is. His sister also told me that they got into a huge fight over this when his dad decided to confront him about what he was up to. His dad put his foot down and told him that he could either back out of this and choose not to defend this Chris guy, or his family would sever ties with him. That led to a lot of drama, but eventually my ex decided to step back and cut his parents off. Yeah, because he was getting paid a hefty amount to defend Chris, and there was no way he was letting that go. He wouldn't even choose his own family over money, so I'd been really damn stupid to think that he'd choose me over money. At least I know where I stand now, and so does his family. We're supposed to meet in court tomorrow, and I'm nervous, but I also know that I'm being honest here, and he's not. That just strengthens my faith in myself. Also, the fact that even strangers on the internet are on my side on this one speaks volumes about who's right and who's wrong. Hopefully, the judge will also be able to see that and will be able to settle this. So, this is the night before the hearing, and my ex just sent me a message from a different number saying that there's still time, and I can back off even now. He said that his client is willing to pay me the $2,000 plus some more and settle out of court, but I'm not okay with that. I want that guy to acknowledge that he screwed up royally and pay me no less than $5,000. I'm not even being greedy right now. I just think that's what I'm owed because $2,000 is what I had to spend only on the day of the accident. There are more medical bills to cover because I'll have to get medicines, consultations, and physiotherapy to properly heal from this incident. I've been suffering from backaches almost daily, and it's affecting my work as well. This is why I'm not willing to settle for anything less than $5,000, and I'm sure that's completely fair and reasonable. I don't even know what the fuss is all about. Honestly, he's super rich, so why can't he just drop $5,000 for an accident that he caused? It just doesn't make any sense. It's not my concern anyway, so I just blocked the other number as well. I'm going to try and fall asleep soon so that I don't have to entertain my ex's attempts to contact me and throw me off my game. This is really the last thing that I need right now, and I'm pretty sure that he's still trying to get into my head and mess with me because he thinks he's going to lose. I mean, that must be the case if he's so desperate all of a sudden. He knows he's going to lose and is trying to prevent that now. Today, we finally had the court hearing, and to my relief, it unfolded more favorably than I had anticipated. Our case was scheduled last, which gave us ample time to observe the proceedings, though it also heightened my nerves. My cousin, who's representing me, was nothing short of exceptional, presenting our case with clarity and conviction. However, my ex-boyfriend, a seasoned lawyer with a reputation for winning, showcased his skill and persuaded the judge to grant a second hearing. I won't bore you with the minutiae of the courtroom back and forth. It's tedious and frankly not worth dwelling on. The more I reflect on it, the more frustration creeps in. There's still a looming risk that I could lose money pursuing this, which weighs heavily on me. I'm immensely grateful that my cousin is keeping her legal fees minimal since we're family, but even a small cost is a burden when my budget is already stretched thin from medical bills and car repairs. Sticking to my principles and fighting for what's right is noble, or so everyone says, but right now, the prospect of another hearing feels like a gut punch. We poured everything into building a solid case, gathering every piece of evidence we could to prove Chris's reckless behavior. Yet, somehow the other side matched our efforts, likely through dubious means. I'm convinced they resorted to underhanded tactics, maybe even bribing someone to bolster their position. It's not just a hunch. I know their connections and wealth give them an unfair edge. The thought of their slimy strategies makes my blood boil, especially since I am fighting an uphill battle against people who seem to bend the rules with ease. The delay of a second hearing is disheartening, to say the least. It's not just about the money, it's the emotional toll of prolonging this ordeal. Every day I deal with the physical pain from my neck injury, and now I'm bracing for another round in court, uncertain of the outcome. My cousin's support keeps me grounded, and I'm holding on to the hope that our honesty will prevail. Still, the idea of facing my ex and his client again, knowing they're likely playing dirty, tests my resolve. I'm determined to see this through, but the weight of it all is hard to shake. I just want closure so I can focus on healing and getting my life back on track. I was already in a sour mood, stewing outside the courthouse while waiting for my cab, when my ex had the nerve to approach me, making everything worse. I avoided eye contact, trying my hardest to tune him out, but without my AirPods, his voice was impossible to ignore. He launched into a sob story, claiming Chris's father had cut him off after the accident, calling it the final straw. Apparently, he was now on his own, scraping by with just a few $1,000s in his account. He pleaded that he couldn't afford the $5,000 I was demanding, which was why he'd pushed for an out-of-court settlement for far less. I acted like I didn't hear him, but he kept droning on, accusing me of being heartless and greedy, words that stung, given everything I'd been through. His audacity pushed me to my limit. I snapped, telling him I had a heart, but it was reserved for those who deserved it, not his reckless friend Chris. I pointed out that, worst-case scenario, Chris's parents would likely bail him out again, ensuring their spoiled son didn't face jail time over something they deemed trivial. After all, his wealthy uncle's influence had already secured a second hearing. I didn't have the luxury of rich relatives to rescue me from my troubles, so I wasn't being cruel or greedy. I was simply standing up for myself. Unlike my ex, I wasn't obsessed with chasing money, but that didn't mean I didn't need it to cover my medical bills and keep my life together. He stood there, dumbfounded, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, grasping for a comeback but finding none. I relished the silence, his inability to counter my words a small victory in itself. After what felt like an eternity but was only about 30 seconds, my cab finally pulled up. I walked away, leaving him standing there, speechless. Though the day hadn't gone perfectly, the second hearing loomed, and the stress was far from over. Getting to put my ex in his place felt like a triumph. I'd held my ground, refusing to let his manipulations sway me. Now I'm holding on to hope that the next hearing will bring this ordeal to a close, allowing me to move forward with my recovery and my life. My bakery, my independence, and my healing are my priorities, and I won't let his tactics derail me. Approximately 3 weeks have passed, and just yesterday I finally received the compensation I was owed. As I had anticipated, Chris's parents swooped in at the 11th hour to bail him out once again. While it's frustrating that he avoided accountability due to his family's wealth, I'm relieved that the court ruled in my favor, validating my pursuit of justice. What unfolded after the judgment, however, caught me off guard and added an unexpected twist to this already tumultuous ordeal. After the hearing, I returned home, expecting some peace after the emotional roller coaster of the courtroom. Unlike the previous day, when my ex had tried to confront me outside the courthouse, he didn't approach me immediately. Instead, he chose a more calculated move. A few hours after I settled into my apartment, there was a knock at my door. To my shock, it was my ex, standing there with a bouquet of roses, his face a mix of sheepishness and bravado. He launched into an apology, claiming he deeply regretted his actions and words throughout this saga. He admitted he'd been an egotistic fool, fully aware that he was likely to lose the case, which had fueled his arrogant behavior. He pleaded for a second chance, insisting he'd seen the error of his ways and wanted to rebuild what we had. I stood there, stunned by his audacity. After everything, his betrayal, his dismissive attitude, his choice to defend someone who caused me so much pain, did he really think flowers and a half-hearted apology would sway me? I felt a surge of anger and resolve. Without hesitation, I slammed the door in his face, cutting off his words mid-sentence. He tried to keep talking through the closed door, but I was done. I told him his apologies rang hollow, and that I had no interest in entertaining his manipulative tactics. The man I'd seen during this ordeal, cold, unethical, and driven by greed, was the real him, not the charming facade he'd once shown me. I made it clear that he was not the kind of partner I wanted, nor the kind anyone deserved. I warned him to leave me alone and threatened to call the police if he persisted. Defeated, he left without another word, and I sincerely hope that's the last I'll hear from him. Later I called his sister, with whom I've shared a close friendship for 5 years, to vent about the encounter. She was unwavering in her support, affirming that I'd made the right call. She revealed that her parents still refused to speak to him, unsurprised by his refusal to apologize to them. Apparently his father, a once respected lawyer who had passed down his expertise, felt deeply disappointed by his son's choices. My ex had squandered the values his family held dear, prioritizing money over integrity. His sister's words only reinforced what I'd come to realize. I had been blind to his true character for too long, but now my eyes were wide open. Reflecting on this chapter, I feel a mix of relief and exhaustion. The legal battle drained me emotionally and financially, but winning the case gave me a sense of vindication. More importantly, it forced me to confront the reality of my ex's priorities and character. I'm grateful for the support of my cousin, who stood by me in court, and for the clarity this experience has brought. Moving forward, my focus is on healing, both from the physical pain of my injury and the emotional scars of this betrayal. My bakery business, which brings me joy and independence, will be my anchor. I'm determined to rebuild my strength, one day at a time, and I'm hopeful for a future where I'm surrounded by people who value integrity as much as I do. For now, I'm closing this chapter and looking ahead to better days.